Forming in the Scottish town of Bells Hill in 1985, Sean Dixon, Jim McCullough, Sushil Dade, I can't find a pronunciation for this last name anywhere, I looked all over, just let me know in the comments, and Ross Sinclair were the Soup Dragons. Originally an indie rock group, they would release their first record through Sire in 1988 titled This Is Our Art. Following that, Sinclair would leave the group to pursue an art career and be replaced by Paul Quinn of Teenage Fan Club. Also, Sean would pick up a drum machine and sampler and begin experimenting in that regard as well for the remainder of the Soup Dragons discography. A contributing factor to their changing sound also is the change in music scene at the time. Their psychedelica on no budget fit really nicely in with the Manchester movement of drug-fueled acid house raves. That new style is on full display on this. Their 1990 second full-length studio release through Big Life Records. This is the Soup Dragons' Lovegod. Super psychedelic fractal cover art full of laid-back, feel-good grooves. This, however, goes beyond the drug-fueled indie dance vibe that it presents. It's got appeal for both a pop listening audience and a punk listening audience, I feel. Songs that show that the band isn't gonna bow down to any kind of convention. They're gonna step forward, kind of trying to break new ground and really do what they want. And it provides a cool little look into a interesting movement of music in the late 80s, early 90s in the UK. I would have never heard about a ton of other bands if not for this and all the research I did about it. I'm excited to jump into them, but first let's jump into this here. Starting out with a Rolling Stones cover that was made up as they went along. They didn't quite remember the lyrics, I think, and just sort of went off of what they could remember and just jumped into it with a fabulous vibe. This is I'm Free. This track features toasted vocals from Junior Reid. Toasting, I believe, just being another way of saying reggae rapped. This is probably their biggest hit, and you might recognize it from it being on The World's End soundtrack. I can see why it's their biggest hit, because man, do I just feel so good every time I put it on, with its celebratory atmosphere, light-hearted lyricism, maybe even a little too cleaned up production. Reed's intro line of "Don't be afraid of your freedom!" hooks me and just keeps me on the line throughout the whole track. I'm free to do what I want any old time. The track that follows up is called Mother Universe, and originally it was the opening track for this album before the success of that big lead single, I'm Free. They would rework this track, re-record it to more match the style of that opening track, but personally I think if you put this song before that track, it wouldn't mess up the flow of the album too much, as it does sort of blend the styles of that first song with the rest of the album, but the narrative of it being sort of an only the good die young story of trying to get a religious girl to loosen up would be, I don't know, I guess funny to me and makes sense to put before the freedom song. Just my 2 cents though. This is a great laid-back indie dance track that you should get into as well. Don't miss out on at least these first 2. The program beat on the next track, Backwards Dog, is complimentary, but I feel like just in general, if the drums were pulled a little bit further forward in the mix, this punky little number would hit quite a bit harder. Then they drop you into the heartbroken, spaced out Softly, which does a wonderful job instrumentally illustrating the feeling of breaking up and drifting apart. Drive the Pain continues the narrative with pushing forward in your own direction, but unfortunately it also has you coming back around for the same dose of pain over and over again, like you've almost conditioned yourself at this point to enjoy it. Then the triumphant title track pop rocks its way back into the light with simple, repetitive lyrics and that feel-good flavor that hooked us in at the beginning. Now, Dreamy Forever brings us down again to a dark, cryptic, depressed place with lyrics I'm hesitant to make meaning out of. I've read that it was just called a love letter to ecstasy, but to me it feels like a suicide note to an unrequited love. Please let me know if you come up with any alternatives, because I'm obviously either way off base or somebody else is. Or we could just slowly slip out of that nasty haze and onto some nice, pleasant, beachy guitars and some enthusiastic na 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 na's in the chorus of the next track, Sweet Meat. Ultimately, though, this song is just kind of a comparison with girls and meat, and so problematic as it is, I can't help but just jam along to Sweet Meat, nah, nah, nah. Sorry guys, I like the track. Now for a bit more of that punky flavor I was talking about earlier, this one's titled Kiss the Gun, and it's an aggressively titled, strange number that still gets my head shaking and my foot stomping, and it's got a pretty catchy chorus as well. It's got that overall sort of rougher, punkier feeling, just not the energy, or maybe just the volume. I need more out of my punk tracks. I need to be slapped in the face of them, I guess. It at least creates a great momentum that Love You to Death rides in on, and these chicken noodle reptiles can show off their pop rock chops some more. Then closing the album out, you've got Beauty Freak that shifts a bit more towards pop punk. My previous statement about the drumming not being loud enough still stands. That makes pretty much all these tracks sound poppier rather than punkier. That's probably a good thing for the record label, but for me, I would appreciate maybe a couple tracks whose maybe lyrical delivery was maybe a little raw, or maybe more spat at me, and the drums just pulled right to the front of the mix and just almost deafened me. Obviously, guitars and everything else plays a part, but I think those two elements could just shift a little bit more towards the punk rock and create just an overall raw and more energized experience for me. That is technically the end of the album, but there's bonus tracks! Woo! 90 CDs, baby! First you got a slowed down Lovegod dub, and then you've got Crotch Deep Trash, another rockin' pop-punk single whose carefree attitude shines and ceremoniously sends this thing off for real this time. I love the cover art, I dig the jams, I'm loving the vibe, man. This is not a flawless album by any regards, but it's introduced me to such a cool little scene and a bunch of other interesting artists. The group made one last album together in 1992 titled Hot Wired, but would fragment afterwards and go all off in their own directions, with the drummer Quinn going off and forming the Primary Five, his fifth band. McCullough, the guitarist, would form Snow Goose. You got Sushil Dade, who would then come out as Future Pilot, aka, and he's put out 5 albums. He put out his 5th and final album as that moniker in 2019, titled Orchestra Digitalis. As for Sean Dixon, I think he put out one more album with the Soup Dragons. Can't remember what it was called, but it was just kind of a bunch of friends and features he could put together, and I think it was kind of a bit of a mess when it came out. Ultimately, he would go and form The High Fidelity, put out 2 albums with them. He had a daughter and a wife at this time, but he realized that he was gay, and he actually abandoned his family and moved to the States, and really filled himself with a lot of regret and a lot of pain, and he cut himself off for a number of reasons from a lot of friends, and the guilt broke him up for a long time, but he slowly found his way as a DJ, and he's now Hi-Fi Sean, and he's put together a couple of albums, most notably a electro dance album that's got a ton of legendary features in it. It's actually called Feature. It's FT dot, and I actually recommend you check it out. I had a lot of fun dancing along with it. Great band, great album. The Lovegod is still filling me with happiness and good vibes over 30 years later. Keep those good vibes going with another review. This is Big Audio Dynamite to the Globe. I definitely think you'll enjoy this if you like any of this. Here's a video YouTube thinks you like, and another button right here that fills me with even more happiness. Take good care. Thanks so much for watching. I'll never find what it's worth in the universe. I'll never find what it's worth in the universe.